Okay, so today we're going to solve by factoring. The first thing that we want to do is we want to look at our C value, which is always the last one that we have in our trinomial. Whenever this is positive, that means that I'm going to have same signs in my parentheses, and I'm going to add to get my B value, which is the middle number. So when I open my parentheses, put an X as my first term, and then I'm trying to see what goes into the second blank. So I know they're going to be the same signs. I want two numbers that will multiply to get me my C value, which is 42, and I want them to add to get me 17. And so the easiest way that we can do this is if we go to our graphing calculator, we can hit the Y equals button and just type in whatever number we want to multiply to get, which is 42, and divide it by X. Then we can hit second graph to go to our table, and we can find the pair of numbers that add together to get you your B value, which is 17. And so 3 and 14 will be my combination that will multiply to get me 42, and will add to get me 17. So in my parentheses, my numbers are going to be 3 and 14. And then the only thing I have left to find out is, since they're going to be same signs, and I want them to add together to get me positive 17, they're both going to be positive. From there, to solve my equation, I can split it up into two separate equations. X plus 3 is equal to 0, and x plus 14 is equal to 0. In both equations, I can subtract the number to the other side to get x is equal to negative 3, and x is equal to negative 14. With the second one, again, I look at my C value. It's a negative number, so that means that I'm going to have different signs in my parentheses, and I'm going to subtract to get my B value, which is 6. I'll take care of the signs later, so I can do my parentheses, x plus and x minus, and then I'm just trying to figure out what number goes in each space. Again, I want two numbers that multiply to get me 27, and then subtract or have a difference of 6. And so it ends up being 9 and 3. And so the trick to remembering, so like when you put it into your parentheses, it matters which one's positive and which one's negative because they're different signs. You want the bigger number to always have the same sign as your B value. So I want to have a negative 9 and a positive 3. Easy way to double check yourself is just to add them together and make sure that you get a negative 6 when you add them together. I can split it up into two separate equations and get x plus 3 is equal to 0, and x minus 9 is equal to 0. So x is equal to negative 3, and x is equal to positive 9 by adding and subtracting the number to the other side. With the last one, again, look at your C value. It's positive. That means same and add. So I want x and x, fill in the blank. Two numbers that multiply to get me 72 that add to give me 17 are 9 and 8. Again, it doesn't matter which one I put in because they're same signs. And this time I want to add to get a negative 17, so I want them both to be minus signs. Split it up into two separate equations. X minus 9 is equal to 0, and x minus 8 is equal to 0. So x is equal to 9, and x is equal to 8. Down at the bottom of the page, we're going to do something called slide divide bottoms up. So whenever I have a number out in front of my x squared, I want to turn it into one just like we did the past three. So I'm going to slide the a value, or the first number, over to the c value, the 5, and multiply them together. So I get x squared plus 11x plus 10 is equal to 0. Again, I look at my c value. It's positive. That means same and add. And so in my parentheses, I want two numbers that multiply to get me 10, that add to get me 11. It's going to be 10 and 1. 10 times 1 gives me 10. 10 plus 1 gives me 11. And then what I need to remember is I always need to undo my first step. So I want to divide both of these numbers by whatever I slid. So with the first parenthesis, if it divides evenly, I can write it as x plus 5. In the second parenthesis, I'm going to do my bottoms up step, which means that I'm 1/2 gives me a decimal, or should be left as a fraction, and so I can write it as 2x plus 1. Then from there I can split it up into two separate equations, get x plus 5 is equal to 0, and 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. So I should get x is equal to negative 5, and x is equal to negative 1/2. Same thing with the next two. I'm going to skip those and flip over to the back. Oops. So on the back, with the first one on the top left, again, number in front of my x squared means I'm going to slide. I get x squared minus 8x plus 4, plus 12 is equal to 0 when I multiply my a and my c values together. C value is positive, which means same and add. I want two numbers that multiply to get me 12, that add to give me 8 is going to be 6 and 2. And again, I want to add them to get a negative 8, so they both need to be negative. I got to make sure I do my divide step, which is divide by my original a. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3, or both numbers by 3. So I get x minus 2 in the first parenthesis, and in the second parenthesis I do my bottoms up, which is 3x minus 2. From there, split it off into two separate equations. X minus 2 is equal to 0, and 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. I'd solve both those equations and get x is equal to 2, and x is equal to positive 2/3. Add the 2 and then divide by 3. With the middle one, again, same thing. Slide the 6 over to the 15 and multiply. So I get x squared minus 19x plus 90 is equal to 0. Again, I want two numbers that multiply to get me, so this is going to be same and add. Two numbers that multiply to get me 90 that add to get me 19 are going to be 10 and 9. And they're both going to be subtraction signs because they need to add to get me negative 19. I'm going to divide both of these by my original a, which is 6. In this case, both of them don't reduce evenly, and so they don't divide evenly, and so I have to reduce my fraction. So I will get 5/3 in the first parenthesis by dividing the top and the bottom by 2. In the second one, I'll divide them both by 3 to get 3/2. Now I can go ahead and do my bottoms up step with both of the fractions. So I get 3x minus 5, and 2x minus 3. I can then split it up into two separate equations and solve, and I'll get 5/3 and 3/2 as my two answers. Same thing with the last one in that row. Slide the 8 over to the 15 to get x squared minus 14x minus 120. This one's going to be different signs, so diff and sub. And so when I do this, again, different signs, one's plus, one's minus. I'm going to use the calculator, 120 divided by x, and go to my table to find two that subtract to get me 14. It's going to be 20 and 6. Remember that the bigger number always has to have the same sign as my b value, so it's going to be a negative 20 and a positive 6. Divide them both by my original a value, so divide them both by 8. And they both don't divide evenly, so I need to reduce them down to 3/4, and then 5/2. Then do my bottoms up step, and get 4x plus 3 and 2x minus 5. Split it up into two separate equations and then go ahead and solve. I'm going to go back over to the front side really quick just to do one last one. Do the last one on the front side, bottom right equation. Just to do one more that has different signs. So again, C value has different signs, so that's a diff and sub. So I slide the 8 over to the c. I get x squared plus 21x minus 22 is equal to 0. So I do different signs. Two numbers that multiply to give me 22, that when I subtract them I get 21, will be 22 and 1. And the bigger number has to have the same sign as my a value, or my b value. So when I do that, I'm going to have a positive 22 and a negative 1. And then I'm going to divide them both by my original a value. So I get x plus 11. And then do bottoms up with my second one. Split it up into two separate equations. So x will be equal to negative 11, or x will be equal to 1/2. I'll save the last three and finish that up on Monday.